Hello everybody, KingRC's here, back with another video. Sorry it's been a while since I've uploaded. I've just had some stuff going on with school and all. But here we are, and today we're going to be talking about the Sakura FGX EVO, the 2018 edition. Is it a good buy, and is it worth it? So, before we come to a final verdict on whether it's worth buying this vehicle, there are a few factors that we need to consider before we make our final judgment. So first off is the track. What kind of track are you driving on? If you're driving on an outdoor asphalt track with big sweeping turns and lots of space, this car is probably better suited. It's quite a bit longer than your standard F1 car, measuring almost a full inch longer from the tip all the way back to your rear spoiler, and the wheelbase is also a tiny bit wider. So there is that quite a bit of difference. An indoor tight carpet track, this car is definitely not the most ideal. Especially since it is heavier and it is at the weight limit for your average F1 class without even a battery in it. If you were to, you would have to race this car with no battery. That's about 400 grams of weight to make weight. So, I mean, some of you guys might get creative if you own this car, but I don't really see where you can shave 400 grams of weight off this vehicle unless you want to do some serious cutting into the bottom of the chassis. But at that point, you're kind of just really messing up the original way it was designed, and that might affect performance. The next thing we need to consider is, what is your plan with it? If you're planning to do competitive racing and you're gonna stick right up there with the, your X-Ray and your Team Associated and your Roche F1 cars, you're probably not gonna get what you want from this vehicle. Not only, as I said, is it heavier, but it's just not very well suited for the said competitive racing. Especially being these very large inconvenient gears at the back. The odd gear ratio that's built into this car makes it very difficult to find the optimal gearing ratio that doesn't overheat your engine, and then you still have that power and acceleration you want. I chased around with it a little bit, but just found that it was a very big struggle to get this thing up to competitive speed. So though it might not be the best for a super competitive racer, what is this thing good for? Well, for starters, like I said, it's a more stretched out chassis, so it is definitely a fair bit more stable. And that could really help out. If you're looking for something that you just want to maybe run around in your asphalt driveway, do some little loops with it in a cul-de-sac, throw some toy cones out there and take it for a rip, it's definitely going to work out for that. It can be very easily tuned, and the ride height is very adjustable on this vehicle, so it isn't too hard to do that, and something like that might be what you're looking for. And if you are, this is a great option, especially being that you've got this fiberglass chassis. It's not something like carbon fiber or aluminum that's going to get scraped and dented up from a few little rocks. One of the most important things to consider when you're buying a new RC or buying this vehicle is where you're going to be able to get parts. I purchased this vehicle off of RC Mart, and that is pretty much the main Sakura dealer that I've been working with. In Canada, I haven't found any close and consistent Sakura dealers in Canada, so it was kind of difficult for me to trust driving this vehicle, especially taking out for a race competition or race weekend like the WIX and the ATS, just because if I broke apart, I was done for the weekend, and I don't really want to show a car and race a car like that that's just going to break. That's a waste of my $20 for the class. If I'm going to last one race, then I'm going to clip a board, break an arm, and I'm out for the weekend. So that's another thing to consider is, can you get a consistent supply of parts? And maybe, like I said, you're just a front yard basher and you don't care, you're willing to wait, well, fine by me then. You have RC Mart and some other online sites where you can get parts for them, and you know what, you might have to wait a week or two unless you rush it, but hey, that's what's there. So the next thing I want to talk about is just some of the differences that this is going to have from your average F1 car. All of these differences, you could say they're better, you could say they're worse, and I'm going to talk about both sides of them. The first thing being the odd offsets of your wheels. These wheels have a ridiculously shallow offset compared to your standard F1, and also the hexes are that of a touring car, not the larger hexes in an F1 car. This means that your rear and front tires are almost non-interchangeable with a standard F1 car. The front tires might, I haven't tested that, but the back tires for sure will not work out. I know with the previous FGX there were some companies, I don't know if it was Sweep, but I know some companies did release their own tires for this vehicle, and sure, that is an option, but it's just another thing to consider, that unless your hobby shop or your local area supplies those tires, you're going to have to outsource and look for different aftermarket tires online. Next thing is, the suspension is completely different than what you normally see. I know some of the Tamiya F1 cars use a similar style, but this is definitely something that I've never seen before and I've never dealt with before. And that is the lay-down cantilever suspension, both on the front and the rear. This makes the car behave a lot more like a touring car, both with the tuning, with the way the arms are set up, and just the overall look of the chassis. This means that you can actually put this on your average touring car setup station and your setup board, and that's pretty much how I tuned this thing in. This also means that it's a little bit more confusing to adjust compared to your standard F1 car, seeing as you can set your preload by screwing it in here, and then you can adjust your camber by small little links in here. It's definitely something that you don't normally see, and it's for better or for worse, like I said. Someone who's more familiar with touring cars might find this easier to work on, while someone who is used to working with F1 cars might struggle to get this thing more dialed in. Another nice thing about this vehicle is that it comes with a body, a front, and a rear wing. This means that you don't have to buy any sort of body or wing, it comes with all of that. This comes clear as a 3-piece, so you can see there are 2 side pieces and then 1 main piece, so you can just paint them separately like I did, and then throw it right on there. The only downside of this being is that both the front and the rear wing aren't, I don't think they're really the universal style. And what I mean by this is that likely aftermarket wings probably will not fit your vehicle. You're probably stuck with the 3 racing ones, which is okay. I mean, at least you know that 3 Racing is going to have them in stock. But when you're trying to get competitive, there's usually a specific wing or a specific spoiler that people say is working. And if you can't really get them, it's going to be more difficult. If you have never been on the RC Tech threads, go check out the one for the FGX. I know there are a whole bunch of guys out there that are doing a lot of work on these things. They're trying to convert the rear to a rear spool diff similar to a touring car. They're trying to convert it to a rear spool, and then they're going to set up a belt drive. I've seen 1 or 2 people do it. I think they were done on the older style. And like I said, that sort of stuff is possible, but just keep in mind that you're putting all of that extra time into a car that's already far from an F1 car. Not to mention the weight issues I talked about. So all in all, I think it's an alright vehicle. You have pretty much 100% plastic in here. The only metal components that are really obvious, and they're not very surprising of course, is your motor mount. You're going to want that to be metal. If you buy a car that doesn't have it metal, that's a serious problem. That amount of torque can easily bend or even break that motor mount. The shocks, I believe, are both aluminum body and aluminum caps, so that's something nice to see. But other than that, we do have aluminum rear outdrives at the back. They don't use any sort of puck system, so over time those will wear down. And then of course, since it's 2-wheel drive, the front wheels, they just free spin, there's no axles up there. Another thing I would like to talk about is the front shocks. These are not actually shocks, they are friction dampeners, meaning that there is just a spring and your damper. They do recommend spreading some of the, I'm not sure what the default fluid is that they supply you, they recommend putting some of it on the shaft and then working it in, and that'll help somewhat tune it, but really don't really see how that would work. At the time of purchasing this vehicle, there were no aftermarket springs, and upon building it, I did find that the front was very stiff. For an outdoor track, or for a more, a track that's less tight than compared to the carpet track I race on, this might be fine, but for a track like that, you're going to want softer springs so it can kind of bite into the turns more and kind of roll with the turns. But this one kind of struggled with that. One more thing I'd like to mention is that this vehicle can fit both shorty packs and full-size packs. There's a small bracket inside the vehicle that can be moved forward so you can fit a full-size pack. However, that might be difficult for you to find you can put a full-size pack. However, that might be difficult for you to then mount your ESC. Sakura shows in their pictures them putting the ESC on this side battery plate. I tried this and it was very difficult to get it to stay on, especially with double-sided tape. The body does kind of sandwich it in there, and you can actually see on this body a little bit of scraping from where the ESC was. So it's an option, but I found that it was easier to shove it in the bottom here along with my receiver. But it's up to you, your decision. The motor fit alright. You definitely want to know a thing or two about soldering because you're going to have to adjust a whole bunch of wires, make some longer, make some shorter, but overall it wasn't too bad. Just remember, if you're putting the ESC up here, you are most definitely going to have to change those wires because they have to go all the way from the front here to the back. So that's just something to keep in mind. There's no set out place to put your transponder. I kind of just screwed it to the top here the few times I was racing this thing, and you can do whatever you want. You might not be using a transponder at all, so it shouldn't really matter to you. The Sakura FGX EVO, we've been through the good, the bad, and the okay, it's there. What is my overall opinion on this? Well, if you're a racer like me, you're getting into indoor racing on the carpet, you're seeing those F1 cars go, you think they're so cool, you know, you've got the guys that have done them all up, like the Ferrari paint jobs and whatnot, and you're like, man, I wish I could do that. And so you pop onto RC Mart and you see this car. It's far cheaper than the other options, so should you buy it? I would say the answer is no. Not only is it a weight issue, and depending on how tough your club track is on you, they might not let you race it at all, it's just too wide. It's not really designed for a tight, fast carpet track. If you really want something to look for, I'd be going for a Team Associate or an X-Ray. Even if you bought those older versions of the cars, it's still going to be closer to being competitive than something like this vehicle. Not to mention, as a newer racer, I must say, it is very difficult for me to get this car dialed in because no one's ever worked on something like that before. All the F1 guys are used to their standard F1 cars with the separate back pod, while this one is got cantilever suspension. It's similar to a touring car, but it's not really like a touring car. It's more like a real life F1 car, which none of us work on. So if you're really trying to get into F1, once again, I wouldn't really recommend it because not very many people are going to have advice about it. If you go for something like an X-Ray or Team Associated, you know, there's most likely people at your track that are already running those vehicles and they can supply you with information and tuning guides on how they set their vehicles up. However, outdoor tracks I know are more popular with this vehicle. Even the videos that Sakura themselves released of the testing of this vehicle and just their action shots of the vehicle were done on a much wider curving track, something that this car is more designed for. It's a track that isn't a specific square or rectangle. You got sweeping turns and pass-throughs, something that this car is definitely a lot better at. With that stiffer suspension, it's going to hold those corners a lot better. However, in a smaller rectangle track like I am, where every corner is either a 90-degree or a hairpin, this definitely isn't my choice for an F1 car. But if you're looking for something that's an outdoor basher, it's not twitchy, it's pretty easy to drive, especially on asphalt where you're going to get a very good amount of traction. Maybe you and the kids want something to do. I don't know, who knows, you've got your son into F1 racing, he thinks it's a lot of fun. Maybe you want to buy him an F1 car to go rip around the yard, and this is definitely something that is probably a good option. It doesn't go too fast, it's fairly stable. You know, you can throw this out on the asphalt and take it for a spin. But, like I said, it's probably something that you're not going to be racing competitively. But in my opinion, for competitive indoor racing, I wouldn't recommend it. And that's the main type of racing I do, so that is pretty much the only opinion for a type of racing I can give. But all in all, it's an okay vehicle. I think I might hold on to mine, throw some cheap electronics in it, take it for a rip on the asphalt, just show you guys what I can do. But anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. More videos on the way. I'm going to try and upload more regularly this summer. I'll see you guys in the next video.